General Lee and myself on this august and historic day of April the 10th of 1865. After the surrender talks, we only spent 78 minutes in the McLean House. For those of you who keep up with such matters, someone told me we were in the house for 78 minutes. Now the next morning on the 10th, many things occurred to me that needed to be done, but one of them was that perhaps I could persuade General Lee to order the surrender of all Confederate armies all across the South. Because on, I think it was March the 2nd, just 6 weeks before the surrender, the Confederate Congress had appointed General Lee as General-in-Chief of all Confederate forces. So he did have the authority to order all Confederate troops to lay down their arms. And I wanted to ask him to do that. So I got on my horse, Cincinnati, and I rode from my headquarters, which as you leave this area, when you make a right turn on the road out there and go up just a bit, my headquarters is on the left. It's clearly marked. General Lee's headquarters is if you make a right turn and go down the road a bit, it's well marked. You go off the road up a little bit and you can see where he had his headquarters. And I rode out to meet him and met him here. He was not expecting me. And he will tell you how he was dressed. He was embarrassed, I believe. I hope not, but I think he was embarrassed. But I came out here to ask him to order the surrender of all Confederate troops.
I was at my headquarters. Being old Army, we're trying to finish reports. I wanted a final report of the Army of Northern Virginia. My staff were trying to get reports from my senior officers. We wanted to try to find some way of accounting for how many troops are here, what transpired from the last time we wrote up a report of the Army. So we were busy at the headquarters. I was also trying to encourage my secretary that was with me at the McLean House, Colonel Marshall, to compose a General Order Number 9, a farewell to my troops. Colonel Marshall, standing right there, had not started on it yet. He had other duties, he's trying to get reports and stuff, and he kept telling me he hadn't had time to do it. Well, I wanted to get that more importantly than anything else. So I put him in a wagon with a guard on it, and I said, you need to write this order. So I'm doing all of this, and I get word that General Grant is coming to see me, and he's been stopped by my pickets right about here. Well, that's when General Grant said I was embarrassed. Yes, I was, because they should have allowed him to come through and come straight to my headquarters. So I'm not completely dressed. I throw on an overcoat that I throw on and get on my horse, Traveler, and I gallop from my headquarters, which is about a mile away, to here to not only meet General Grant, but to apologize to him for stopping him right here instead of allowing him to come through my lines. So then, of course, I'm going to exchange pleasantries with General Grant, and we're going to talk about what he just referred to.
As I said, I tried to prevail on General Lee, order the surrender of all Confederate troops. Let's stop this now. General Lee said, I can't do that. I have to talk with my president. Now, what we didn't know at that time was, as we were standing here where you are standing, Jefferson Davis and the Confederate cabinet was already in flight and heading for Georgia. And General Lee demurred and said, I need to speak to my president before I can do that, order that. And I understood this. I was greatly chagrined because I thought, you can stop the killing. But I also understood that he would have to talk to his president. I would have felt the same way. I need, before I can give that kind of an order, I need to speak with the commander-in-chief. I'm the general-in-chief, but I need to speak with the commander-in-chief. But General Lee demurred, and he had a couple of comments to make about that.
What General Grant didn't know at the moment was that I knew that President Davis and the most of the cabinet were still active. They were in the field. They had left Danville, Virginia. They were heading south. So the Confederate government, if you could say it was that, was still existing. I still had a president to report to. I could have done what General Grant asked, but I wanted to make sure that President Davis at least knew I was going to do that. But more importantly, I knew that different commanders of the Army still in the field, like General Joe Johnson and Kirby Smith and all of them, as soon as word reached them that I had surrendered, they would do the same thing, which is what the case was. They would all, as they learned that I had surrendered my army, they knew it was time for them to surrender their armies. So I declined his request. I was a little uncomfortable with declining it, but more importantly, I still believed I was held to the civilian government to answer to them. They were still there. They still were in office. They hadn't surrendered. They hadn't been captured. So I left it at that. We did discuss several other things. He offered me a cigar. I told him that my son Rooney, that's out here with the cavalry, would much appreciate it, but I don't partake. He was very generous. We'd also talked about one very important thing. My soldiers are going to be paroled. They're all going to disperse and go home to all the various states they're from. I told General Grant that they need something to show that they have surrendered and they are paroled. Because once you leave here, how do you show that you were here and that you were paroled? And so General Grant and I discussed the logistics of what we were going to do to solve that problem.
Well, General Lee, at the time of the surrender, had about 20,000. He had left Petersburg 8 days ago now, on April the 2nd, with about 50,000. But after the battle at Sailor's Creek and the battle at Five Forks before that, and the desertions that had occurred, because so many men, as they were coming west across Virginia, were coming through lands where they lived, and they all knew it was over, they went home. After the surrender, a good example of what I'm about to tell you became a necessity, the parole. And before you leave, you must go by the shop up there, the print shop, and get your parole so you can go home and not be challenged. And if you wish, as you see us through the day, General Lee and I, particularly whichever one you want, will sign your parole for you. But as soon as the surrender was effected, keep this in mind, the war is still going on. Because the Army of the Potomac has surrendered, yes, General Lee is correct, the dominoes will fall. There is no need to continue the fight if the Army of Northern Virginia and Lee are out of the fight. It's a Fitzhugh Lee with work 24 hours a day for 3 days, printing enough paroles. Rooney Lee, Fitzhugh Lee with the cavalry, they had taken several thousand troops when they realized it was over, and they left the area. But then they realized, when they found out paroles are being printed, they had, in your parlance, an oh no moment, when they realized we need to go back to Appomattox and get a parole, so we won't be shot or hanged on the road. Because when a man says, well, I've been surrendered, show me some proof, I don't have any, shoot him. And it would be that blunt and that quick. So they had, so Fitzhugh Lee brings his cavalry back. So while there were only about 18 to 20,000 ANV here, many thousands more came back to get a parole. That parole was your pass. Also, I issued an order that said any Confederate soldier, upon presentation of his parole, could ride any government transportation, boat or rail, to the place nearest his home. Now, not many people are aware of that little comma in the history books, but you know now. I issued an order that said, presentation of the parole, he can get on any steamboat, military steamboat, most of them were. He could get on any military train, and all of them were a military train if a colonel on it said this is a military train, other than those that said USMRR, United States Military Railroad. So that was a pass. A soldier could get here, from here to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, if he's a Florida soldier surrendering here, and ride the train all the way home. So that parole became more than important. It became vital for a man to get home, or you walk 700 to 1,000 miles. So I issued those orders. And they were looking for some more food. I'm glad that we captured General Lee's trains at Appomattox Station in there, because we were feeding him. I know the joke is that we gave him their own food. Yes, we did. But for those of you who were here yesterday, you'll remember I said when we left Petersburg on April the 2nd, I ordered that my army take 7 days rations. So we leave on the morning of the 2nd. The afternoon of the 9th, the surrender is in effect. Who needs food? I've got 75,000 or thereabouts. Army of the James over yonder and the Army of the Potomac over here. I've got 75,000 troops that are out of food. So we got into those rail cars with the food as well. We were all eating the food that General Lee was being able to enjoy. So we had that distribution of food and supplies, medical supplies too.
One addition about the rations and the food. General Grant was gracious enough that part of the conditions of the parole document that you could go to any military camp, fort, installation, and they would issue you food. They would give you food.
Day, April 9th, I visited General Grant, and he informed me that he would leave with me and my corps and General Griffith's corps to receive the surrender of Lee's army, collect the private property, arms, etc., and then transfer them back to Burkittsville. He had some guidelines. In the parlor at the McLean House, Lee and Grant had agreed to the following. First, rolls of all the officers and men were to be made in duplicate, so one list could be given to an officer from each army. The arms and artillery and public property were to be parked and stacked and turned over to designated officers appointed to receive them. This did not include the sidearms of officers, private horses, and baggage. And then Lee and Grant needed to appoint the officers to hash all this out. So it wasn't just Gibbon. Grant appoints Gibbon to oversee this commission, but then also assigns Major General Charles Griffin of the 5th Corps and Major General Wesley Merritt, who's commanding the Federal Cavalry. Lee assigns Lieutenant General James Longstreet, Major General John B. Gordon, and Brigadier General William Pendleton. And these are the 6 men that are to get together and hash it out. The next morning, April 10th, 1865, Gibbon writes in his post-war memoirs that it had been noised about, i.e. rumors were flying, that Lee and Grant were going to meet for a second time. So he gets up on his horse, he's trying to find where's Grant, where's Lee, right? We want to see this because he missed the first meeting inside. And if any of you were here earlier, the second meeting took place out here on the Lynchburg Stage Road in the open.
Right here, that's about where we are now, this brown rise. And this is where Smith's brigade puts up their defensive position, along this high ground right here. All right, I'll pass this around. You can see that I wrote the Coleman House in there. Now, some of you were with me yesterday, so some of you will hear the same stuff I told folks yesterday. But to benefit those that weren't with me yesterday, I will cover what happens with Smith's brigade. Let's set this up. The night of April 8th, George Custer's cavalry captures 25 guns of Reuben Lindsay Walker's artillery down at Appomattox Station. About 2 miles from here is the epicenter of the battlefield. The cavalry, actually, some regiments charge into the village of Appomattox Courthouse, and there's an engagement in town, a small engagement, but the Federal cavalry get driven back out and fall back to about this position here. We're pretty much across the road from the lane that goes to the North Carolina Monument. That is Trent Lane. And one of those troopers that came back and fell back to this position here is this fella, William Smith of the 2nd Ohio Cavalry. And he said that when they got here, they laid along the road all night without unsaddling, ready for biz. B-I-Z-Z, he spelled it. Some Civil War slang. So he didn't have time to write out business. After that, General Lee holds a council of war at his headquarters, probably about 1.5 miles east of us here, where he consults with Generals Longstreet, Gordon, and Fitzhugh Lee. And they are discussing what should General Lee surrender. He's been in correspondence with General Grant, but they all believe that only Federal cavalry could have got that far ahead of them and that they could fight their way out on the morning of April 9th. During the night, this fella here, Colonel Charles Smith, formerly of the 1st Maine Cavalry, along with this fella here, James Lord. They take position right here, and they send their skirmishers out, and they are waiting for the Confederate attack. Now, when they initially form, they form across the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road, right behind us here, and down Trent Lane. Most of Smith's men have Spencer or Sharp's carbines, but the 1st Maine Cavalry have Henry and Spencer carbines. Henry rifles can fire 16 shots before reloading. Spencer's can fire 7. So he has a bit of firepower. And this is what Charles Smith reported about this fight. He said, "I encountered and drove the enemy pickets within a half-mile of the courthouse, threw up breastworks of rails, and waited till daylight without blankets or fires. At daylight, the enemy advanced to attack, but the delay of these 2 hours, our forces were able to get into position, so that when my command retired before the enemy, he was received at ready, aim, fire, and the career of the Army of Northern Virginia was brought to an end." But right behind you is the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road, the original road trace. So, thank you.
That's good.
All right, you can see one of our waysides here pointing out the Coleman House. If you look right over there, there's where the chimney was in this photograph. So that'll give you a pretty good idea. I think we're pretty much about in the spot where the boys on the horse or the mule there. Let's get to the information on the Coleman family here. So this was the home of Dr. Samuel Coleman. He was 27 years old at the time of the battle. His wife was Amanda. She was 24 years old. She was a daughter of George Abbott Sr. and brother of George Abbott Jr., who was the captain of Company B of the Liberty Guards, 46th Virginia, from Appomattox. They had one enslaved woman named Hannah Reynolds. Her age was about 40. The estate was given to Amanda by her father, 254 acres. 2,400. No, the estate was worth $2,450. They had 254 acres here. Now Samuel went off to join the 46th Virginia. He couldn't get a commission in it, so he came back home. His brother William did get a commission in the 46th Virginia. Samuel comes home. He hired a substitute for him in the military, and he began farming and studying medicine, studying pharmaceuticals, and practice being a doctor, learning as an apprentice. And one write-up on him, it says it doesn't seem that he actually farmed that much. He possibly rented others to work his farm. They have a daughter, Mary, in 1863, and Amanda's sister, Mary, and the daughter, Isabella, were living here at the time as well. Now, on April 8th, they leave here, and they go to their father's house, George Abbott, down at a place, the home called Redfields, on the other side of Appomattox Station. Hannah does not go with them. There's different accounts, but one of them say that she was sick and didn't leave the house. So, and also felt obliged to protect the family's belongings. But this will become the epicenter of the battle here. The storm of shot and shell that came through this area will inflict the most casualties on a single regiment. The 11th Maine will suffer near 60 men killed, wounded, and captured here in the fighting around the Coleman House. Hospital, we don't know the specific spot, but they said it was behind the house. So this at least would be behind the chimney, so it may have been out here. And this is where J.B. Morrison, he was a surgeon who he was in charge of the Army of the James hospitals, and he set up a flying hospital right here. A flying hospital was kind of like a Civil War MASH unit. They would go out in the field while fighting's going on and treat casualties. The ones that they didn't make it, they buried, apparently not very well, right here on site. You had different surgeons from different regiments, but this would be the area where most of the casualties from the fighting on the morning of the 9th are treated. Mackenzie's fight here on the morning of April 9th. We know about Smith's brigade being at that ridge that we started out on. Mackenzie's out here around the Coleman House. He has the support of Egbert Olcott's battery. There's Egbert Olcott. How do you like that name? Old Egbert Olcott. He commands a battery of the 1st U.S. Artillery, and they are in position out here by 6 o'clock in the morning. So the Confederate cavalry, when they attack here, it's troops under Rooney Lee, which is General Lee's oldest son, or middle-aged son, William Henry Fitzhugh Lee. And Fitzhugh Lee has 3 brigades. There's not many left of Behringer's brigade after they got routed at Namazine Church on April 3rd. There's Robert's brigade of North Carolinians, 2 regiments, and then you have Beale's brigade made up of 4 Virginia regiments, and the 14th Virginia will be heavily engaged in the fighting. General Beale, he actually is wounded in this fight near the Coleman House. The color bearer for General Mackenzie, Joseph McNamara, takes a bullet under the right shoulder. He does survive, but that bullet remains in his body for the rest of his life. Additional troops end up coming up to support Rooney Lee, and they come from Tom Rosser's division. And Rosser has 2 brigades, one under General McCausland, and the other one is Deering's brigade, but Deering has been mortally wounded at High Bridge on April 6th and is under the command of Elijah White, formerly of the 35th Virginia Cavalry. So this area is going to be hit by combat several times that day. Not only the fight with Mackenzie and Beale's brigade right here in this vicinity, but the 11th Maine from Dandy's brigade is going to get hit in this area as well. So after the Mackenzie and Young get pushed back, that's when Edward Ord's Army of the James arrives. And Ord has 2 divisions of infantry from the 24th Corps. These are white troops. He has 2 brigades of United States colored troops with him. John Gibbon commands all those troops, and one of those soldiers with the USCTs is Sergeant Peck here. But Sergeant Peck was the first one. So I wrote an article for Civil War Times about Peck. So the Western Brigade, the sign we passed and we're going to go back to, they start pushing down with their left flank on the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road, closing off Lee's line of retreat. But Confederate cavalry is still out here. I mentioned Deering's brigade under Elijah White, and artillery of Pogue's guns are up on the ridge along Trent Lane. And they have a good line of sight to the Coleman House area, and they see the 11th Maine coming around the house, and they hammer them with artillery. And in the course of it, they will inflict heavy casualties on the 11th Maine, the heaviest for any regiment in the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse.
Thank you for watching our video. Please remember to like, share, leave a comment, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel. Also, if you're looking for more history-related content, then we invite you to head over to our website, americasbesthistory.com. There you'll find hundreds of well-researched articles on a plethora of topics ranging in dates from 1491 to the present day. We upload new articles weekly. Hope to see you there.